Hello everyone and welcome back to the Scafidi Travels YouTube channel. So, what advice would I give to someone thinking of getting into travel writing in 2020? Today I'd like to talk you through 5 tips that I have for anyone thinking of getting into travel writing in 2020. Those tips are: be specialized, be an expert, watch your digital footprint, be creative in your sources of funding and pitch widely, keep your expenses low by getting free stuff. I've put links to each tip in the description box below, so if you want to skip ahead to a particular tip, just click on the link. Here are the 5 tips for you. I think they're pretty universal, whether you are just getting into things or whether you're pretty established and you're actually already writing things and having them published. So number 1, and probably the most important, is to be specialized. So you need to pick a niche and stick to it. So for me, my niche is definitely Africa. And in particular, it's the lesser visited parts of Africa. So you're not going to find me writing a safari guide to Kenya or a guide to the museums of Egypt, for example. I really like to focus on bits of Africa that aren't very touristy at the moment. For some people, that might be as specific as focusing in on just one country. You might decide that you're interested in focusing on Middle Eastern cuisine, or sports in Japan, or fashion in Italy, or ultra luxury travel. Could be anything. It doesn't really matter. There are thousands of ways to view and write about the world. But if you pick an area that you're passionate about, that's really going to shine through in your work. If you're consistent in focusing on that area, you're going to see 2 benefits from that. Firstly, you're going to attract the kind of engaged following that you want. And secondly, you're going to make yourself a lot easier to find by commissioning editors who are looking for that kind of work or that kind of focus. Another key aspect of this is if you carve yourself out a niche, then you are going to build something that's equally important, which is our second tip, which is expertise. Be an expert. So tip number 2, be an expert. Sounds easier said than done. Readers really want to hear from experts. They don't want to hear from someone who has just parachuted in for a week from somewhere else or who has done most of their research online. You have to be honest with your audience, and expertise is really difficult to fake. Do your research, speak the language, live in the place you're talking about, engage with the other people talking about the same issues as you in the same place. Becoming an expert doesn't necessarily have to cost you money, but it's definitely going to cost you time. This is a process that you can absolutely start at school. So, take the creative writing courses, pick up the languages you think are going to be useful, learn to take feedback and to edit based on that feedback. Expertise is what's going to really make you stand out when applying for a writing job. Try to put yourself in the shoes of a commissioning editor. They must get thousands of emails every year with people asking to get paid to go to Thailand or Paris or some other popular tourist destination. So why should they pick you? What makes you more qualified to talk on that subject than all of the other applicants they have? If you can answer that question clearly and confidently, then you're one step closer to getting a commission. I was recently asked by a ministry in Angola to help them build a tourism development plan for a river in their territory called the Kwanza River. Now, why are they asking me, some random foreigner? Well, partly because I've written 2 travel guides to the country, and partly because I've kayaked the whole length of that river. So at least in their view, that makes me an expert on that particular subject. Right, tip number 3, watch your digital footprint. Now, one way a commissioning editor is going to gauge your expertise on a particular subject is by Googling you. They might also check out your social media presence. This is known as your digital footprint. A lot of employers do this now, and I can't emphasize this enough. Your digital footprint is basically your CV now, or your resume if you're American. So, if a commissioning editor Googled your name tomorrow, what would they find? What would they see on your Twitter account or your public Facebook posts? What would they see on your Instagram or Snapchat stories? And what does that say about you? What about your LinkedIn profile? By the way, I've got so many job offers through LinkedIn by people just Googling Equatorial Guinea and my name popping up at the top of the search function in LinkedIn. So if you don't have a LinkedIn account, set one up for yourself immediately. It's a really useful way of getting travel writing commissions. So how can you curate your digital footprint to make sure potential employers find what you want them to find rather than some embarrassing picture of you 10 years ago? Well, the first thing you can do is make sure that you only post new content that aligns with your personal brand. If you're claiming, for example, that you are a travel writer with a focus on Thailand, you're an expert on Thailand, then if I Google your name, the entire first page of search results should be articles about Thailand written by you, or profiles of you with information about Thailand in there. So let's have a look now at my first page of Google search results. If you stick my name in, and you can see it's basically my professional profiles from my publisher and LinkedIn, plus a load of stuff about my travel writing, my documentary film, and links to my books. You can see that my footprint is pages and pages of content relevant to my job. Google even lets you edit your own knowledge panel, which is here, over on the right, if you get verified with them, which is a pretty straightforward process. The second thing you need to do is delete stuff that doesn't fit in with your personal brand. Social media stuff is pretty easy. You just change your privacy settings or you delete all that embarrassing stuff, assuming you're the author of that post. If you're not the author, and especially if you're not an EU citizen, then things get a little bit more complicated. If you're an EU citizen, you're in luck because you have the right to be forgotten. What that means is that you, as an EU citizen, can ask Google to take negative personal information about you off their search results, and they have to comply under EU law. Just search for their personal information removal request form, I think it's called, or maybe it's a removal request form. Anyway, Google that, fill it out, send it off to them, and they should be able to de-link your name from that particular site that you're not happy with. If you're not an EU citizen, then things are a little bit more complicated, as I said, but you can use paid services such as Delete Me to go through and curate your digital footprint. There are plenty of excellent guides here on YouTube that will show you how to curate your digital footprint. If you want, just Google it or look for it here on YouTube and then follow the steps. Bottom line is, Google yourself, make sure that you're happy with all of the results that come up. My fourth tip is to be creative in your sources of funding and pitch widely. Research trips tend to be expensive and the pay isn't usually very high for travel writing gigs as a freelancer. This means you've got to be really creative in order to stretch the budget that you do have to get the job done on time and to a high standard. At its simplest, this means getting paid as much as possible by as many different people as you can find and reducing your expenses to as low as you can for that job. Starting with the pay, you want to make sure you have multiple commissions for each trip that you take, so stack up your jobs. If someone's paying you $300 for a photo story about the architecture in a particular capital city, have a think. Is there anyone else that you could contact who would want a similar story about the location that you're in? Who else can you persuade to pay you for different bits of work while you're there? A few $100s for one commission isn't very much, but if you can stack up 5 or 6 of these on the same trip, then the trip starts to be profitable. Also, pitch and sell your work widely, as wide as possible. It's not just magazines and websites that will pay for your writing and your pictures. What about writing some copy or giving some photos to a tour company that covers that destination? What about contacting companies that run travel advice apps, or location tour apps, or location service-based apps? What about advertisers? What about the government in the host country themselves? Maybe the Ministry of Tourism. Could you do anything to help them? You're going to get a lot of rejections, but the more relevant pitches you send out, the more likely you are to get some successful commissions. Tip number 5, our final tip. Keep your expenses low by getting free stuff. Now, this is probably the first one that everyone thinks about when you tell them, I'm a travel writer. Getting free stuff. It's rare to get a job as a freelancer where the client will actually pick up the tab for your travel expenses. Strange as that sounds. Sadly, Bradt don't give me a gold card, which I can use to cover all of my expenses in my 5-star hotels and pay for all my champagne, caviar, and lobster dinners. They'll agree a flat fee with you for the job, and whatever you don't spend in expenses, you get to keep as pay for the work. Now, under a model like that, we want to keep expenses as low as possible. So, contact service providers and shamelessly ask them for as much free or discounted stuff as you can. Hotel rooms, vehicle rentals, flights, anything really, as long as you can articulate a clear benefit to them giving it to you free or discounted. A few years ago, I got unlimited free flights internally with Angola's national carrier TAG. How did I persuade them to do that? Well, it was pretty simple actually. I just wrote to the head of the company and I asked, why did they agree? Well, because the head of the company recognized that what I was doing, which is writing a travel guide, was actually beneficial to their long-term business plan. They wanted more tourists to come in, and therefore they supported me in my mission to write this travel guide. So find people who can help you bring your expenses bill down and ask them for help. Now, until you're pretty established, it's going to be quite difficult to persuade a business to give you free stuff. Until then, air miles and credit card points are your best friend. Now, I'm going to do a whole separate video on how you can use air miles and credit card points to drastically reduce your travel expenses when it comes to flights and hotel accommodation. But to give you a sneak preview of that video, there are loads of ways of collecting air miles that don't involve flying, and the more of these air miles you use, the more of the original commission you get to keep rather than spending it on expensive flights and hotel rooms. There are hundreds of great web resources out there that will give you advice on collecting points in this way. As a former UK resident, I really like the website Head for Points, so please check that out. A couple of other ones I like are God Save the Points. I also like The Points Guy. And the forums on Flyer Talk are really, really handy on this topic. But as I said, I'm going to do a whole other video about this later on, maybe later this month. So, those are my 5 tips for anyone thinking of getting into travel writing in 2020. I hope you enjoyed it. If you think I missed anything out, please remember I am running a Reddit AMA, an Ask Me Anything, later on this week, Sunday the 19th of January, so you can come along to that AMA and ask me a question. If you're watching this video after the 19th of January, then I'll put a link in the description below to the discussion and you can find all the questions I was asked and all the answers that I gave. Thank you very much for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification icon to get told when we put new videos up.